Hello students, welcome back to the lecture series of Advanced Java. Today we are going to study about filters and we are going to implement the filters in websites. So let us begin. What are filters? Now filter name itself is telling you a lot about its functions. It is a type of configuration which sits in between the place or a resource that you want and yourself. So if you want to access something, you have to pass through various filters. So let us see what is the need of filters and what are filters. Say for example, you have a client and you have a server. On your server, you will be having many servlets. Let us take for example A, B and C. You have 3 servlets deployed on a server. Now your client wants to access servlet A, servlet B and servlet C. Now say for example, if you want to access all these, you have certain parameters. If you want to access servlet A and B, you are supposed to be an authenticated user. If you want to access servlet B and C, you have to implement atomicity, all the various ACID properties, because it is going to handle the database. And if you want to access A, B and C, all of them, you have to have a security validation over it. So in short, if you want to access any of the servlet, compulsory you have to have security and validation of the data that you are sending. And if you want to access any other A, B or C individually, you need to implement different kinds of filters on them. Okay, so what you will do is, a simple person, if he wants to access A, then he is going to write the code of authentication inside A. He is going to write the same authentication code into B. Then if a user is going to access B and C, then he is going to implement transaction management into B and the same code into C. Same applies for C. So these various codings of authentication, of atomicity, of ACID properties, as well as for security and validation, all these codes have to be written in all the different servlets individually. Now what about a servlet D? If you have a new servlet D coming in, again you need to have a specific code or repeat the same code for D inside the D servlet. In order to make this process less cumbersome and easy, what we are doing is we are just removing this common code from outside these servlets and we are building some plugin. Now what is this plugin? It is a plugin that is just built and kept. It is a filter which is built and kept, and whenever needed we can just plug in that filter so that it can be reused anywhere. So instead of writing the same code at all the places or more than one places repeatedly, you are just bringing it out and you are putting it in form of a filter and you are attaching or configuring the filter on whatever servlet you want. So let us say for example, if you have a client who wants to access servlet number A and servlet number B, then it has to pass through filter F1. And this F1 is going to help in authentication management. Similarly, for B and C, you have another filter for transaction management. And for all the 3 servlets A, B and C, you can implement a single filter for security and for validation. The beauty of this scheme is, if your client is relaying a request on servlet A, it is compulsory passing through 2 different filters, filter F1 and filter F3. If your client wants to access servlet number B, he is compulsory passing through again 2 filters, that is F1 and F2 and F3, 3 filters. And if a client is moving on to servlet number C, he is passing through a total of 2 filters, that is F2 and F3. So another part of this is, this request relaying is done by Tomcat. So if you are accessing your filter number F1, relaying the request to F3, then F3 is not aware of the F1 filter. F1 is also not aware that the request is not going to is going to F3. So it is a kind of hiding. They are not available, they don't know of who is there after them, but they are relaying requests. So it is a kind of security. Okay, and the client also doesn't know that he is passing through all these filters in order to get the servlet. So it gives you a lot of security. Okay, now there is something called as filter chaining. Now what is this chaining? Chaining is you are implementing more than one filters, and this client is accessing this resource first, this resource second, and then the main resource. So all this comes under a chain. This is called the chaining concept or filter chaining. Filter chaining basically means when you are implementing more than one filters in a chain. That is specifically filter chaining. Okay, this was the need of filters. So now let us move on to the types of filters. There can be many different kinds of filters. You can implement authentication filters that can help you to authenticate any user. If the username password are valid, then they will be able to access the servlet. So you can develop a filter in between which is validating the username password. Same applies for logging the data and auditing. Same applies for image conversion. So if you are sending a, say for example, MP3 file and the server requires a MKV file, then you can keep a filter in between that can convert any other format to MKV format. Next is that was specifically for voice conversion, but you can have even for image conversions. You can have for data compression, you can have for encryption, and also if you want to handle databases, you can have resource access filters also. So these are the various types of filters that you can implement. What further we are going to do in the demo session or practical session is as shown in this slide. You are going to first of all implement a filter or create a filter. This you can do when you are implementing the filter interface. Any class that you are making is implementing the filter interface. Now you already are aware that if you are implementing an interface, if a class is implementing an interface, it has to compulsory override or implement all the various methods, abstract methods which are present in the interface. So this filter interface consists of 3 different methods, that is init, destroy and doFilter. So you have to implement all these 3 methods inside the class that is implementing your filter interface. Then you are going to configure the filter on that particular servlet that you are making or the resource that you are making. So this configuration thing is to be done in your web.xml file, and when you do this step, you are actually configuring a filter over a servlet. Also, you will see how a request is moving from a web browser to a servlet via the filter, as well as a response that is coming from the servlet to a web browser again via a filter. So all these things we shall see practically, and let's begin with the practical session. Hello dear students, we shall now start by doing or implementing the filters. First example we will take is we will develop a simple filter and check whether how this filter is working, what are the methods of the filter interface that we need to implement in the filter developing class, and how a filter can be configured on a servlet. So we shall start with this is my servlets demo project, in which I have nothing in the source packages, and I have deployed this project or web application on Tomcat. Now first thing that I will do is I will create a servlet. So new servlet. Okay, let us name it new servlet, and next add the information to deployment descriptor. We will finish it. Okay, now as you can see, this is a web.xml file which we have made, and it has a servlet and servlet mapping tag. It has a servlet name and servlet class tag, servlet name and URL pattern in it. This is what we have already studied in the previous lectures. Okay, now we are going to write a specific code for my servlet, import javax.servlet.http.star and import javax.servlet.star. We will also import io.star. Okay, now we will create a servlet. We'll make it public class new servlet extends http servlet. It consists of a do get method. It consists of http servlet request req and http servlet response res, and it throws IO exception and servlet exception. Okay, into this method we will set the content type first, that is text/html, and we will create an object of print writer, that is out. If you aren't aware of what code I am writing, you can refer to my video lectures in the description box, which will tell you more about how I'm getting this code. Okay, so this is what is my servlet all about. Okay, now we are supposed to create a filter. Okay, so we will create a simple filter here. It will be a new Java class. Okay, so this Java class we will name it as filter1. Let us name it filter1 and finish it. Okay, now this is my filter. You will import the same things which you were importing for servlet. javax.servlet.star. Okay, now whatever filter class you are making will always implements the inbuilt filter interface. So if you are implementing any interface, you compulsory have to implement all the abstract methods of that interface. So here the filter interface has three methods: init, doFilter and destroy. We are going to implement them here. So first is public void init method. Inside the init method we have the filter config interface object. Let us name it filter config. Okay, this is my object of filter config. Second is public void destroy method, and next is public void do filter method. The do filter method has three parameters. One is servlet request req, then we have servlet response res, and filter chain interface, that is fltch. Okay, now we have implemented all these methods. In my init I will just print a system.out.println statement, so this result will be seen in the console, not on your browser. So let us write init called, init of filter called. Okay, this is my init. Inside my destroy I will write destroy of filter called. Okay, now inside my do filter I am going to write the same thing that I do in that I write in my do get and do post methods. So here I am going to write again print writer object, response dot get writer. Okay, then response dot set content type I have to write, set content type, and we will name it text slash HTML. Print writer, we don't have IO. Okay, print writer is done. Response dot get writer, right? Okay, next is we will just write a simple print statement that we are inside the filter 1. We are inside filter 1 and we will go to the next line. So we will print the BR tag. Okay, right. Okay, now we have created a filter, we have created a servlet. Whenever you will run this program, you are going to run this part, that is your servlet. Okay, now this servlet is supposed to be called, but we have already configured a filter 1 upon this servlet. So we are supposed to first call the init method of the filter, then the doFilter method will be called. After doFilter finishes execution, the request will be sent to this new servlet. Okay, so here we are supposed to write a method called as doFilter. Print writer response dot get writer. Okay, yeah, we haven't done throws servlet exception and IO exception. We are supposed to throw these two exceptions here. Okay, because if this IO we are not writing, this print writer can create problems. Okay, now from this filter I want to redirect my request to the servlet, so I will write a doFilter method, and doFilter method is nothing but a chain from where a filter is calling a servlet. So what you are doing is, if your servlet needs to be called, the filter is called before you are calling the servlet, and this filter is relaying the request to the servlet, or rather the Tomcat is helping you to relay this request. So you are supposed to have use something called as chaining. So you have already created the chain object, which is this. Okay, so you will be using that FLTCH dot doFilter, and in this filter you are going to send this request object and this response object to the servlet where you are going to redirect. Okay, so we have completely finished creating a filter, we have completely finished creating a servlet. Okay, so let us write a print statement here, inside servlet or servlet called, whatever. Okay, now we need to configure the filter over the servlet. For that you will refer your web.xml file. In your web.xml file you are going to set a filter. So after your servlet and servlet mapping tag, you will have your filter tag. Inside your filter tag, you will have filter name and filter class. Filter name and filter class. Right? And another tag that you will be having is filter mapping tag. And inside your filter mapping tag again you will have filter name and URL pattern. As you can observe, filter is being written instead of the servlet tag, and instead of servlet mapping tag you are writing filter mapping tag. The rest remains same. Everywhere you are supposed to substitute servlet by filter. Rest everything remains the same. Okay, now the name of the filter is, you can write anything, you can write ABC, you can write PQR, you can write anything. Okay, so I am naming it filter 1. Okay, and here also I am supposed to write the same name, that is filter 1. If I write ABC here, I have to write ABC here. Okay, these two names should be matching. Okay, now filter class is the name of the class that you are supposed to call. So you are supposed to call this one, this class, filter 1. So this name has to compulsorily be filter 1. Okay, filter 1, yeah. And URL pattern, you are supposed to write the name of the servlet or the URL of the servlet that you are going to call. So I want to call this servlet, new servlet. Okay, so if I want to call this new servlet, the URL pattern for that is this. So the same thing I am supposed to write here. The URL pattern is supposed to be written here. So whenever we write these lines of codes, we are actually configuring a filter over a servlet. So now when I will send a request, HTTP request for this servlet, or when I will try to run this servlet, then the web.xml file will be called. It will see that you need to call this by this URL, but this URL has been configured by a filter and the class to be called is this filter. So this filter is going to run first. When this filter will run, object of the filter will be created by Tomcat. Then the init method will be called, and the filter config object which was created will pass on the initialization parameters here. Then this method will work. Then you will be able to see the doFilter method. So next output will be inside filter 1. After this, it will go to the next line. Then inside your doFilter method, it is redirecting request and response to the next resource, that is your filter, that is your servlet. So this doFilter request response with these two parameters is going to go here inside your doGet method with request and response. Then your next output will be inside the servlet. This is what you are going to see. So let us run the program and check. We are going to run this first. So let us run the file. This is my Tomcat. My Tomcat is running. See, now to interpret the output which I told you, let us move on here. Let us look at the output window. Let us look at this project. You can see that init of the filter is called. After the init method was called, we could see the output here. We were inside the filter. Filter called the doFilter method and we could go inside the servlet. Okay, now if you want to add any code here inside your filter, like if you want to check for validations, if you want to check for security purpose, whether the user is giving the correct username or password. So all these checking can be done in this part, that is your doFilter. If it is not an authenticated user, then you will not call the doFilter method and redirect to the servlet. But if it is an authenticated user, you can directly relay the request to the required servlet. Okay, what we saw previously was that you are trying to access the servlet, the filter is called and the servlet is called. This is what you saw. Running the servlet will call the filter first and then the servlet. You were getting the output, but now you do not know how you are getting the output. The flow that you saw while requesting was from filter to servlet, but now we shall see the flow of response. The flow of response will be as whatever data you are getting back from the servlet will first move on to the filter and then it will be rendered on your browser. So your request and response are actually like the request that you are sending will have filter, then the servlet, and during the response from servlet again you will see the output of the filter, and then you will be able to get the result from your web browser. Now we will see how this mechanism happens. So when I will try to run this new servlet, this filter will be called, this inside filter 1 will be printed. Okay, now this inside filter 1 is going to do filter and send the request to new servlet. So you will get your output as inside servlet in your on your web browser, and things are over. But you are forgetting one step, that your output will also pass through this filter and be rendered to the client. So how is this part done? You are supposed to add one single statement here, that is out.println, and inside that you will write returning from servlet, returning output from servlet. Okay, now what is the meaning of this? When you will try to run this servlet, this filter will be called, filter will redirect to the servlet, so you will get this, and while returning the result from servlet to the browser, this filter will be called again, and therefore you will be able to see this statement too. So let us see by running the program. Let us check. I am running this file. Okay, see, inside filter 1, so filter was called for the first time, then the servlet was called, and while returning the filter was called for the second time. That's all for filters from my side.